Shalom, everyone. Welcome to the maiden voyage of the upper room after hours. I'm your host, Darren. Now for something slightly different, and if you've joined us today, chances are you've been familiar with some of the work at the Almond House, whether it be the Torah portions, whether it be on the Upper Room podcast, and now me, the cameras, no guests, a lot of technology, and a lot of things that I'm trying to get used to, essentially. So breaking the fourth wall, as it were. I'm really looking forward to it. We've got some topics, some subjects that we're going to get into today. And hopefully over the course of time, God willing, we'll pick up on some narratives, some themes, and establish more of a diversity within our platform here and our viewership. I think we're in an interesting time in terms of how people receive their information and their entertainment. And I'm really humbled if you have taken the time to join me, and because there's an absolute plethora in ways in which you can receive your information now, whether it be through social media, whether it's the just online, YouTube in general. Do people still watch television? I presume, yeah. Whether it's through your TVs, more conventional methods, and so I think this is our attempt at reaching out and diversifying how we reach people. Now, I guess the vision for the show would be, current affairs, world events, through a biblical perspective, through a biblical lens. What I can say, this isn't a prophetic news show. There will undoubtedly be times where there may be a crossover with prophetic elements taking place, whether it be wars or rumours of wars, famines and pestilence, and all the other shenanigans that take place today. Of course, that will cross over. But for me personally, I can't fit everything into a biblical prophetic narrative. So there's just too many things that take place on the earth for it all to be But that doesn't mean to say that everything that isn't taking place isn't prophetic, because this is all part of the story, the greater plan. I'm not your prophet, I'm not your teacher. But if you are into that kind of thing, if you're not familiar already, we've got the Torah portions on the YouTube channel. We've also got the Upper Room, where we bind and loosen on different subjects. And I think this is something that's just going to be slightly different in terms of, meandering through the world events and things that are taking place. I guess from my perspective, which is humbling, because I'm just a man with a laptop and a Bible and a faith in the Most High God. So just to reiterate the perspective that I'm coming from, now, if you do want to get deeper into theological elements of what we stand for here, because I can't speak for the full congregation. I don't represent what the Almond House has to say. Like, there is definitive separation between my opinion, the way I see things, and what is taught. Now, if you are interested in the theological foundations of our faith and what we stand for, then please by all means, go to the website, check out our creed, and you'll find all the details there. But for the most part, I'm representing myself. I'm not speaking on behalf of anybody else. I'm fully accountable to myself. I am but a man. I will get things wrong. I will probably misrepresent some things in some ways, but I'm also acutely aware that when dealing with biblical narratives, when dealing with the word, that there is a weight of representation, and that should be the same for any believer, no matter what they're doing. They're always representing Christ in whatever they do. So that's the foundation, essentially. Now, like I said, we can get into current affairs, we can get into world events. I might even stick a tinfoil hat on occasionally, go down some rabbit holes, but we'll see where we're led, essentially. But you know, just a bit of background for myself. I remember back in the day where you had your Alex Jones, you had Richie from Boston, Pockets of the Future. Who else we got? Even today, big fan of Days of Noah. So I think we're all familiar with alternative ways of ascertaining our information and our truth, so to speak. So it's, like I said, it's very humbling and very privileged to be in this position now to be on this side of the camera rather than the other. And I say this in all humility, so we'll just have to see where it leads. So thank you for taking the time to join me, and we'll see where it leads. But in the meantime, we'll get into it. So. Right, let's get into it. So our first story. Now there may be things that you may have seen on the internet yourself. I probably spend too much time surfing around looking at useless stuff, but every now and again you'll see something that just isn't right. And for the believers out there, it's like we all have debates about what Bibles we use, what translations, how accurate they are, or this one, and quite rightly so, but every now and again, certain things come across in the media where I think we can all safely agree that it's just not right, and this is one of them. So, let's get into it.
Let us confess our faith today in the words of the Sparkle Creed. I believe in the non-binary God, whose pronouns are plural. I believe in Jesus Christ, their child, who wore a fabulous tunic and had 2 dads. And
now, right off the bat, the red flags. It's just. Let's just let this play out.
Saw everyone as a sibling child of God. I believe in the rainbow spirit who shatters our image of one white light and refracts it into a rainbow of gorgeous diversity. I believe in the church of everyday saints as numerous, creative, and resilient as patches on the AIDS quilt. whose feet are grounded in mud, and whose eyes gaze at the stars in wonder. I believe in the calling to each of us that love is love is love. So, beloved, let us love. I believe, glorious God, help my unbelief. Amen. Let us confess our...
Help her unbelief, help my disbelief. Where do you start? Now this is a Lutheran church in America now. It just beggars belief, let love be love, be love. Accept the love that actually has patience and understanding towards those of a differing belief. If you actually hold true to the tenets of the Bible, let us love those that agree with us. It's just it's a fascinating insight into how far away things have fallen now, that there are so many elements to the church at large that they've just fallen so far away from the original intention of what the church, the ecclesia, the called out ones, was set up for back in the first century, and then here we are with a non-binary, confused Jesus. This is an indication of where we're at, and on one hand it's pretty funny, it's quite amusing, to be honest, but then you've got people attending these churches, going to these congregations, being fed this narrative, which again, when you have this bleeding of culture and society into church, there are times in history where church would dictate the culture, and now we have a culture that's dictating large portions of the church. The Sparkle Creed. I mean, you've got the Creed of Nicaea. You've got all sorts of creeds in church history, but this is where we're at. And it's, on one hand, it is you can be quite flippant about it, but there's a reason why we study our Bibles. There's a reason why we get to know the Word and have it etched on our hearts. It's because we're only one generation away from people forgetting. And it can set a very dangerous precedent when young children and young people and even adults are trying to bend, this woke narrative into biblical theology and understanding. Now, I'm not saying for a second that this is representing the full, full church of America. That's not what I'm saying at all. But for this to be taking place in our time now, I think it just reiterates how important it is we do what we do, how important it is to know the Word, and know the Word within your. I'm not saying we all have to be like scholars, that we all know how to know the Greek and the Hebrew, but just basic tenets of the faith. I think we're going to be surprised as to how the most simple elements of the faith are just going to actually stand us in I guess in really choppy waters. On one end of the scale, I guess you've got persecution and martyrdom, but just in terms of saying, no, that's not the God of the Bible. That's not what the Word says. It's just just an indication of the importance of knowing your Word, basically, and I guess people are handed over to their desires. I like to listen to a sermon that's going to convict me and highlight the elements of my flesh that need to be taken away and sanctified, or you're going to want to get your ears tickled. You're going to not want to offend people. You're going to want to be inclusive. And this is the result. So I'm sure there's a whole load more we can go into in terms of the things that have been taking place. I mean, you've got the whole drag queen story hour, drag queens in churches, and it's like, you know, if I'm putting my liberal hat on, it's like you're free to do what you want. If you've not been if you've not received the Holy Spirit, you haven't received convictions of your sin, and you're leading a certain life, and like, have at it. That's the world. I'm not, you know, it says in the word to not hold people to the standard of the scriptures in that way. But my point being is, don't call it church. If you want to worship these idols, if you want to worship these demons, if you want to invert the God-given natural order of things, have at it, but don't call it church. Don't call it the way. Don't call it marriage. That's just me. So I'm sure that's to be continued. So this is very strange territory for me. I'm definitely in the wilderness with this one. I'm far from a Luddite, but I've got all these buttons. I've got all this amazing technology at my disposal. Praise God, and I'm literally learning as I go. I'm not dependent on my guests. I'm not dependent on my brothers. Getting everything set up. I'm here on my ones, just doing it. So I appreciate your patience, and I think there's an endearing quality to rustiness, to maybe not being as good as thing as you would like. So it's good stuff. So next segment. Now, growing up, I was just like a product of television and media, and I was literally only as good as the culture around me. And one of those, I guess, protagonists in the stage of my life was the comedian and, I guess, media personality, spiritual guru, Russell Brand. Now, I just said before about holding people to a certain measure, but there are those in the world that profess profess God but deny the power thereof. And it's interesting. We just had the Torah portion, Balak, where it talks about the story of Balak and Balaam, the ruler and the sorcerer, and the depiction of the sorcerer was like, it was so unnerving because there were so many qualities to him that were like, well, godly, like in terms of his relationship with God, the way that he heard from God, the fact that he'd had experiences with the Holy Spirit, and just highlighted and reiterated like what it means when somebody's in a prominent position and speaks of God and speaks of the ways of God and does it in such a way that is like 99% 99% there in terms of the truth that's being purveyed. But every now and again, you'll just hear something that's just like, oh, right, there's the red herring, essentially. And Russell Brand's one of them for me. Like, I've followed his career like over a long period of time, and I think even in latter years where you see this progression somewhat of his spiritual journey and going through a process which I'm empathetic to, but nonetheless, I think it's just important to highlight the warning signs, because when there is that much truth wrapped up in what an individual is saying, it's you have to extrapolate sometimes that little bit of leaven that ruins the whole lump. And I just came across one this week on a podcast. It's the Diary of a CEO, which again is a secular podcast, but for me it has some interesting guests. They go through some interesting tropes of the human condition, and every so often you might get a conversation in and around faith and spirituality, and that's quite often the way within the world. There are many platforms, many media formats in which they aren't Christian, they aren't professing the faith, but I do find an interest in seeing the context in which Christians are viewed, or even celebrities or higher profile individuals who go through a spiritual journey, awakening, whether it be in truth or falsehood. It's an interesting narrative to watch and see. And so there may be platforms and areas in which I wouldn't necessarily recommend, but that's just my personal preference of where I am on my journey. That I like to see these tropes of godliness and spirituality within many different areas. And this is one of them. Now, Russell Brand is just like, he's amazing in terms of his ability to articulate. He seems to have these like full-blown narratives, just like completely cued, and he's just a great speaker and very engaging. So when he talks about God and his faith, like I said, there can be so much truth in it. But I think even as believers, we've got to be a bit careful in terms of like when we're rooting for somebody or we're taking stuff in, like, and I'm not saying I'm like the spiritual police where I can discern everything, but just every now and again you're like, oh gosh, like that sounds so good, like he's really getting it, and then he's not. It's like, oh. So we'll just play this clip and have a look through and see what you think.
As a form of connection, when a lot of people are put off by the term spirituality because it sounds a little bit exclusive and a little bit hoo-hoo ha-ha, but I would class myself now as being spiritual. Thanks in part, I have to say.
I mean, even the demons are spiritual, but that's another.
To my partner, who is a breathwork instructor, and I met in Bali and so on. But one of the quotes that I love from you is, like many desperate people, I need spirituality, I need God, or I cannot cope in this world. I need to believe in the best in people. Since I've become spiritual, I have found that it's easier to be alive.
Now, before we get into this, I mean, like, there's so much spirituality. YouTube is just like a whole of spirituality. That so many people are spiritual right now. But as soon as you mention the rules to spirituality, it's like, I'm out of here. But yeah, anyway.
Spiritual. What is that word?
Spiritual literally means not material. That's what it means. It's not observable or measurable. The problem perhaps that we have nowadays is that we live in a quantitative reality where all things are measurable, where all things are predicated on rational principles. But all of us know what love is. All of us know what intuition is. All of us know, as C.S. Lewis beautifully outlines in Mere Christianity, when we have transgressed against some moral code that appears to have been instilled in us, and in spite of the advocacy and campaigning of evolutionary biologists, seems to appeal to some nuministic tendency, nuministic meaning simply a sense of awe, a sense of oneness, a sense of glory you might experience at sunrise or sunset, or looking into the eyes of a loved one or even a stranger and knowing that the connection is real. Now,
just before I let it go on, it really annoys me how these like nearly Christians in popular culture, like they love C.S. Lewis. They love hijacking C.S. Lewis and getting into the metaphors of the things that, like Mere Christianity is like, for me, like the 101 of the faith. Like it's such a great book, but there's something about these, like the Russell Brands, these guys just love getting on C.S. Lewis as well. Jordan Peterson's another one. It's just like, and I understand you got the Jungian I get that, but it's just really frustrating.
Knowing that the unitive force is real and that somehow this connection implies a set of ethics, morals and principles. It's not just, oh wow, God is one, let's lose ourselves in some hedonistic revelry. That pleasure is not an end point. That service is our way of acknowledging this unity.
Amazing. Servitude, rules of the game, moral compass. This sounds great. So
spirituality for me is a survival technique. You won't get very far in this world without it. And if you don't have it in a declared, explicit, and I don't mean doctrinal way, I mean personal, but
I don't mean it in a doctrinal way. See, this is the danger. Where if you don't have doctrine, what do you have? Where is he ascertaining his doctrine from, and what is that? Yeah, doctrine matters. It's well important.
But somehow connected and communal way, you will try to create God. You will try to create spirituality from your preferences. Your preferences will become your God. I prefer it when people talk to me like this. I repel this. My aversions and my preferences will become my religion. And I'm capable of that today. I'm lucky to be such a craven, mad smackhead. And it's nice to walk around the streets of Shoreditch where I have used, where I've scored, where I know the back streets of Brick Lane, where there are enclaves, where they serve up Muslim men wearing full regalia that would never deal with that kind of business. It's against the Quran, but serve it up to slip down them rap runs, to see it trace across the silver page, to lose myself in smack world, and to come back here now with a different way. The city has changed and I've changed, and no man crosses the same river twice and no man visits the same Shoreditch twice, because the man is different and Shoreditch is different.
Again, like so eloquent, poetic, the way he describes, his experiences, and being a reformed addict. Clearly he's had, an amazing turnaround in his life, and it's not for me to negate the transformation that's occurred in his life. It's just how and the whys and wherefores of the rules and how he attributes this, and just the way he describes, being in old haunts, old places. It's just a very for me, it seems like a very sincere description of what it means to have this transformation take place. But there's just an undertone of discomfort along here.
I was looking for the same thing then. Like when I was looking around then for smack and crack and all of that, I was looking for the things that I'm looking for now. And if I'm not very rigorous in my spiritual practices, and they're still sort of simple, I know I can use a lot of long words. It's a thing I like doing. I get off on it and stuff. But spirituality ain't complicated. My nan's better at it than I am. My mum, my wife, they're all better at it than I am. They do it natural, because they're not like mobilized by this sort of primordial yearning that can...
and that for me, it reiterates that scripture about, how the nations do a Torah unto themselves. It's like, oh gosh, like, I know, I study the word, I do all these things, all these endeavors, but there's people out there who just like absolutely smash it. So I appreciate that sentiment.
Can become my fuel. It ain't no easy task to turn all that gunge, that swamp gunge, that Neolithic jet fuel into love of one another.
There's people now that are living a life where, including me probably to many respects, that are using preference as our God.
Yes.
You sniffed that strangely.
Well, because I thought, is there chlorine in it?
Really?
Do you mean fluoride? Probably.
I just wondered.
What is it?
Water.
Water, okay. I don't think there's chlorine in it. I hope there's not chlorine. Those people that are choosing preference as their God now, that are living a life maybe where materialism is their savior. There's a couple of questions I have here. That the Russell that was in Shoreditch for other reasons once upon a time, and the Russell that's in Shoreditch now, you said that they were both looking for the same thing. Sorry,
I mean, here comes the clincher, basically. There's a previous monologue to this, which really built up to what we've just gone through there. And like I said, like so much truth and good stuff, but we get to the clincher.
What was old Russell finding, and why wasn't the thing he found as good as the thing he finds now? I.e., what is the outcome of those that are choosing preference as their God? Like, why is that such a bad thing? What is the long-term or short-term consequence?
Well, I wouldn't suggest that there is but one path. As they say, as Krishnamurti says, truth is a pathless land.
It wouldn't suggest that there is but one path. Truth is a pathless way. But it says in the word that Yeshua is the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. And that's the clincher for me. There's so much good stuff in there, but if you're not careful, it gets a bit slippery. It's just I put him in that same category as a dare I say, like a Jordan Peterson or even a Kanye West. They say so many good things, so much of the right things, and then they just let themselves down by saying something that's just completely off key, wavy and heretical. Now, the interesting thing is, like, is this intentional? Does he know this? I don't know. I've never met the guy. I'm just speculating at this point. Am I saying that he's a sorcerer like Balaam? Like, no, but it just evokes that that premise of those that speak of God, those that speak of godly ways, and there's like an inbuilt, like intrinsic rooting for these individuals. It's like, there's nothing more I'd love to see than somebody get radically saved in the public eye and come to the truth and proclaim the gospel. And you're just inherently rooting for them. So you can get blindsided sometimes and think, well, and then they say things like this and you're like, whoa, gosh, like, got to be careful. You got to be careful, basically. And again, this isn't me like shaming Russell Brand. Like, he's a very likable guy, very likable character, funny. And like I said, speaks a lot of the truth. But it's just, for me, it was an example that if you're not careful, you can get swept away by somebody's personality, their ability to speak well in public, to speak about God, to speak about even obedience, to speak about transformation. But when you dig a little deeper, and there's other things out there with regards to Russell Brand that would just, it's just rank heresy, basically. And so there's that, basically. And just be careful out there, guys. So next up, again, when I was considering opening topics for today. Now, bearing in mind, this is like, I guess, like a pilot show, essentially, because, you know, in the future, it'll be great that we can maybe do this as a live stream, that we can get a chat going. So it's my hope to get this, potentially, God willing, as more of an interactive, maybe community-based place where people can come, make suggestions, interact. I'm glad that there is no chat right now, because my head would just be, it would be swimming. It's enough to get used to all this as it is. But yeah, God willing, we can build a sense of community and maybe suggestions in terms of topics. We've even got the potential to speak to guests, have them on the show live. So yeah, I'm just looking forward to seeing what the future is in store with regards to this format. So like I said, when considering topics and subjects, I was thinking about in the last Torah portion, Jackie, our brother, when doing the teaching, was talking about casting lots. And there are different examples in the Bible of how God led certain protagonists who used the form of casting of lots within certain situations. And the main premise that Jack brought was it was an indication of God's character, that he'd be happy, he's impartial. Essentially, he's a God that doesn't show partiality, and so there are certain situations where partiality isn't essential, because it's one or the other. And basically, it got me thinking in the realms of divination and strangely enough, gambling. Now, gambling in itself, to say that it's a sin or anything like that, I wouldn't go as far to say that, but very much aware of the popularity of gambling in modern culture, and historically too. This isn't, there's no new things under the sun, as it were. So this isn't a new phenomenon, but I think with the advent of certain technologies and the our relationships to technology, it seems to be that certain behaviours or certain access to excess is an all-time high, and we're witnessing real time a fallout of what this access is, and gambling is one of them. So one of the elements that I find fascinating is that, I'm not here to judge those that partake or have an addiction with regards to it, but the premise that fascinates me the most, I can't remember who said it when I came across this sentiment, but basically it was that it's not necessarily the winning, the monetary gain, although I'm sure that is a big factor. It isn't necessarily the adrenaline rush or the dopamine hit that you're receiving when your bet comes in. It's actually at its heart. It's actually having a sense of control, because what you're doing is you're predicting the future, as it were. Now, if I'm looking ahead and I'm going, right, I can predict these scores come in. It's like, I know the future. I have control, and this is a massive factor in terms of the implications and the self-seeking within this area. Now, divination in essence is trying to acquire knowledge of unforetold events, maybe for your own benefit, personal gain. Now, obviously, in the word, it's described as an abomination, that we as believers aren't to partake in this. And I'm not suggesting that gambling is divination, but there is a historical relationship there. Now, this isn't for me to sit here and bash addicts. Now, gambling was never for me. I was never interested in placing bets in, put a quid on that, or do you want to go on the fruity or Grand National? Like that just wasn't ever for me. So I'm not in the, I had other things going on. Praise God, I didn't have that one to contend with. But so it's not about. I'm not here to like bash those who have done or continue to suffer from it. It's for me. I'm interested in the aspect where we have a hope that is anchored in Jesus. My ability to move forward in my life is based on, the word of God, the promises of God, the prophetic nature of this existence. I have resolve and understanding in terms of who we are, where we are, what's taking place, and my place in the world. So I have a contentment and an understanding about things that are due to take place. Now, that doesn't mean to say that I don't, have anxieties, worries, fears, trepidations about my personal life or the world at large. Like, that doesn't negate that at all. But my bottom line is always that it's God's plan. It's okay. But those who aren't in the faith, those in the world, my heart is for them in terms of where they're placing their hope, where they're placing their faith. And unfortunately, I can see this correlation here with gambling and the access to it. Now, just as an example, if you take, again, like some people aren't into football, that's fine, that's fair enough. I can take or leave it. It used to be a big thing in my life, but anyway, that's a different. But look at sponsorship within, whether it's like the shirts, the kits, whether it's the advertising. It's just like, it's ridiculous. Like the percentage of teams, I think it's like well over 50% of the upper echelons of professional football like are sponsored by betting companies. The advertising is ridiculous as well. Like it's being like propagated so hard. And again, I'm not here to say having putting a bet down here or there. Like, that's not for me to say. But the access to it is phenomenal. Like, you used to have to go. Again, this isn't something that I would do, but you used to have to go to the bookies and sit there in the afternoon and place your bets and watch it on like now it's all on your phone. You can just do it as much as you want when you want. And I just see like a crippling effect within culture, particularly younger people, where this access is it's ripping people apart. Now, part of the part of my heart towards this is seeing that, of all of the vices, all of the trappings of the world out there, whether it be sex, drugs, music, whatever, like there's something about gambling that absolutely rips families apart. Now, if I'm looking at it from a perspective of the enemy, and I'm utilizing all of these tools in order to attack the man, attack masculinity, attack the family, and to divide that as much as possible. This is an amazing tool of which he can do that. Now, this isn't necessarily just believers. It's believers in the world alike. I'd be interested to see what the statistics are within maybe Christianity itself. How many of those are either casually gambling or still affected by it, whether they're if they're in the faith and professing Jesus, if there's still I'd just be interested to see if there would be any stats on that. One of the difficult things at the moment is because it's the phenomenon itself has been around for such a long time. But what we've seen is such an explosion that we're still in the early stages of seeing the fallout generationally of how it's affecting people. So I just thought it was like an interesting correlation there, where this view of gambling and divination. So I came across this article, Encyclopedia Britannica. Again, I'm not trying to look like a smarty pants. It's not something I'd usually go on to. But gambling is one of mankind's oldest activities, as evidenced by writings and equipment found in tombs and other places. It was regulated, which as a rule meant severely curtailed, in the laws of ancient China and Rome, as well as in the Jewish Talmud, and by Islam and Buddhism. And in ancient Egypt, inveterate gamblers would be sentenced to forced labour in the quarries. The origin of gambling is considered to be divinatory, by casting mass sticks or other objects and interpreting the outcome. Man sought knowledge of the future and the intentions of the gods. From this, it was a very short step to betting on the outcome of the throws. The Bible contains many references to the casting of lots to divide property. One well-known instance is the casting of lots by Roman guards, which in all likelihood meant that they threw knuckle bones, which again, that's a different form of, early form of dice, I believe. For the garments of Jesus during the crucifixion. This is mentioned in all four Gospels and has been used for centuries as a warning example by anti-gambling crusaders. However, in ancient times, casting lots was not considered to be gambling in the modern sense, but instead was connected with inevitable destiny or fate. Anthropologists have also pointed to the fact that gambling is more prevalent in societies where there is a widespread belief in gods and spirits whose benevolence may be sought. The casting of lots, not infrequently dice, has been used in many cultures to dispense justice and point out criminals at trials. In Sweden, as late as 1803, the Greek word for justice, dike, comes from a word that means to throw, in the sense of throwing dice. So I think this is fascinating. European history is riddled with edicts, decrees, and encyclicals banning and condemning gambling, which indirectly testify to its popularity in all strata of society. Organised gambling on a larger scale and sanctioned by governments and other authorities in order to raise money began in the 15th century with lotteries, and centuries earlier in China with Keno. With the advent of legal gambling houses in the 17th century, mathematicians began to take a serious interest in games with randomizing equipment such as dice and cards, out of which grew the field of probability theory. Apart from forerunners in ancient Rome and Greece, organised sanctioned sports betting dates back to the late 18th century. About that time, there began a gradual, albeit irregular, shift in the official attitude towards gambling, from considering it a sin to considering it a vice and a human weakness, and finally to seeing it as mostly harmless and even entertaining activity. Additionally, the internet has made many forms of gambling accessible on an unheard of scale. By the beginning of the 21st century, approximately 4 out of 5 people in Western nations gambled at least occasionally. The swelling number of gamblers in the 20th century highlighted the personal and social problem of pathological gambling, in which individuals are unable to control or limit their gambling. During the 1990s and 80s, pathological gambling was recognized by medical authorities in several countries as a cognitive disorder that afflicts slightly more than 1% of the population, and various treatment and therapy programs were developed to deal with the problem. So I think it highlights some really interesting points there. I think it was Derek Prince who spoke on the premise of everything is spiritual first, and then it manifests here on earth. And so if you take that premise with gambling, and it's interestingly said there with regards to, benevolent gods and whatnot, it's like, what are these influences, and where are these influences coming from, and what is the fruit of these influences? Is it greed? Is it power? Is it, stature? And sadly, is it more, psychological elements of, is it to appease anxiety? Is it a comfort? It's not just about a thrill or excitement. Is it a place where you can forget about the world and things taking place in it? And part of like looking into this, even just on a surface level, was the rates of suicide that are associated with gambling, which again, like, that's the win for the enemy, basically, isn't it? For somebody to take their own life, is just that's the win for the enemy. And obviously we're here to win souls for the kingdom. So anytime that we're seeing a pattern of this nature, we need to be alarmed, and we need to arm ourselves with the realities of what's taking place. And like I said, a lot of these things come in the form of entertainment, come in the form of something that's light and fluffy. And when you actually get into it, it's dark, it's deep. We've got one article here in The Guardian, and it talks of a guy who took his life back in 2015. And it just tells his story, regular guy living his life, but had this other side of his life of a devastating gambling addiction. And it said here that the parents of the guy that passed away, the Richies, did their own research and estimated that there were between 250 and 650 gambling-related suicides in the UK each year. They have welcomed the official report, which confirms their estimate of hundreds of lives lost each year. Now, this was back in 2015. I think we can safely say that that the rate and the consumption is increased within this area. That's an incredible statistic, even though that's probably not accurate. You could probably say it was a bit more. If that's arguably one person every day, that's just in the UK. That's not even looking in parts of Asia where like gambling is so part of the culture, or America, or anywhere in the world. That statistic is too many. It's too much. And again, it's for me, it's not about the condemnation of the individual who's doing it. It's that lack of hope. It's that lack of definition to their life that just brings so much sadness. And like I said, it destroys families. It destroys people's lives. And I just think it's an incredibly I don't even want to say interesting area, because it's people are losing their lives because of it. But yeah, I've got another article here. What is it? The Neuroscience News. High levels of gambling linked to 37% increase in mortality. High levels of gambling are associated with a 37% increase in mortality, according to a new study from researchers at Oxford, which revealed that the top 1% of gamblers surveyed spent 58% of their income, and 1 in 10 is spending 8% on the habit. Published today in Nature, the study led by, this is a great name, Dr. Naomi Muggleton, highlights the financial damage, negative free lifestyles and health of gamblers who can move from social to high-level gambling in months. It's long been known that gambling is highly addictive and can cause financial problems, but the report reveals the association with a range of wide-ranging serious issues, including increased mortality. So high levels of gambling are associated with a likelihood of mortality that is about 1/3 higher for both men, women, younger and older. So that's not even just necessarily like suicide. That could be physical issues, stress, strains, pressure. I don't know. Like, stick it on the list. But again, it's just a heavy subject, I think. And I just thought it was an interesting area to highlight. What people are dealing with. Like I say, whether it's drugs, lust, all of these issues that are currently being pushed on the world in a big way. I think we need to be able to like recognize these patterns, see these behaviors, and be there ready for the solution, which is ultimately the gospel of Christ, the fruits of the Spirit, and the fruits of our compassion and love for our fellow humans. So that's gambling and divination. So that's about it actually for this episode. Again, thanks for joining me. I'm sure, God willing, if I look back on this, we'll see some rustiness, we'll see some interesting stuff. But no, genuinely, I appreciate the time that you've taken to watch this. And any suggestions, any ideas, please feel free to give us a shout, either on the website or via YouTube itself. Don't be a stranger, reach out. And thanks again for joining me. Shalom to you all, and see you again next time. Much appreciated.